The lonely wedding guest. The clinking of champagne flutes and a ripple of delighted laughter barely registered with Lily as she sat hunched at the furthest table, her small frame dwarfed by the ornate chair. A crisp linen napkin lay untouched beside a plate piled with miniature quiches and delicate pastries, none of which held any appeal. Her gaze, wide and a little wistful, was fixed on the kaleidoscope of joy unfolding before her. The bride, a vision in shimmering ivory lace, spun gracefully with her new husband, their faces alight with an undeniable, radiant happiness. Confetti, still clinging to the edges of the polished dance floor, sparkled under the grand chandeliers like scattered diamonds. Her fingers, small and almost translucent, tightened around the worn ear of her teddy bear, Barnaby. He was her constant companion, his button eyes reflecting the distant glimmer of the fairy lights strung across the ballroom. "They look so happy, don't they, Barnaby?" she whispered, her voice a reedy murmur lost beneath the vibrant chatter. Barnaby, of course, offered no reply, but his familiar weight in her lap was a comforting anchor in a sea of strangers. A group of bridesmaids, their dresses a soft blush pink, coalesced near a towering floral arrangement, their giggles echoing with a carefree abandon Lily could only imagine. Children, slightly older than her 8 years, darted between tables, their shrieks of delight punctuated by the occasional stern but affectionate warning from an adult. It was a symphony of belonging, a rich tapestry woven with threads of shared history and deep affection. Lily, a solitary dot at the edge of the pattern, felt acutely the absence of her own thread. She was an outsider, an accidental observer, a misplaced punctuation mark in someone else's beautiful sentence. She watched the groom lean in and whisper something into the bride's ear, eliciting another cascade of smiles. A pang, sharp and unfamiliar, twisted in Lily's chest. It wasn't envy, not precisely. It was a longing, deep and quiet, for that kind of connection, that effortless intimacy. She pictured her own parents, though their faces were a blurry, half-remembered dream. Would they have laughed like that? Would they have held her hand and twirled her around a dance floor, her small shoes scuffing against the polished wood? Barnaby's fur, soft and matted in places, offered silent solace. She imagined him as her father, sturdy and reassuring. Sometimes, when she was alone in her small bed at the orphanage, she would weave elaborate stories for him, stories where they had a home, a garden, and a table piled high with too many sweets. In those stories, no one ever sat alone at the back. The music swelled, a romantic ballad that seemed to carry the very essence of love and devotion on its melody. Couples swayed together, their movements fluid and graceful. Lily observed a young boy, perhaps her age, being swung high into the air by a man with kind eyes and a booming laugh. He caught the child, spun him gently, and then held him close, ruffling his hair. A wave of profound loneliness washed over Lily, cold and isolating. She yearned to be held, to be seen, to be the center of someone's world, even for a fleeting moment. She wished for a family, not just a place to sleep and food to eat, but a warm, enveloping embrace, a feeling of absolute belonging. Her grip on Barnaby tightened further, as if by holding him close, she could somehow conjure the family she so desperately craved. The joy around her, so vibrant and undeniable, only amplified the quiet ache within her heart. A kind gaze. The clinking of cutlery and a murmur of happy chatter filled the grand hall, a symphony of celebration that, to David, felt just right. His brother, beaming, was finally married. David, having just finished a polite but lengthy conversation with a distant aunt about the merits of organic gardening, scanned the room, a familiar warmth spreading through him at the sight of so many joyful faces. Then, his gaze snagged. Tucked away at a small, round table near the large bay window, a little girl sat alone. Lily, he remembered her name was. She was meticulously arranging a small pile of breadsticks into a miniature log cabin, her brow furrowed in concentration. A half-eaten slice of cake sat untouched beside her, its pristine white frosting marred only by a single, perfectly placed raspberry. Her small, floral dress seemed to swallow her, and the way her shoulders hunched inward suggested a world much bigger and louder than she was comfortable with. A strange ache, a familiar pull of protectiveness, stirred in David's chest. He'd always been sensitive to the overlooked, the quiet ones who blended into the background. He saw the way other children, flushed with sugar and excitement, chased each other between tables, their laughter echoing. Lily, however, remained a solitary island in a sea of merriment, her focus unwavering on her breadstick architecture. He watched for a full minute, half expecting a parent or a friendly relative to join her, to draw her into the festive current. No one did. The sheer normalcy of her isolation was what truly bothered him. It wasn't that she looked sad, exactly, more like she'd simply accepted her quiet corner. But the wedding was meant to be a day of shared joy, of connection. To see such a small person so utterly detached, so self-contained, felt profoundly wrong. He pictured her at home, perhaps, in a similar quiet corner, making up stories to fill the silence. His heart gave a little squeeze. He pushed off from the pillar he'd been leaning against, the polished floor cold beneath his dress shoes. The decision was made before he even consciously thought it. He wouldn't let her spend the evening constructing edible fortresses by herself. It was a simple act, a small gesture, but he felt an undeniable urge to bridge that quiet gap. He took a deep breath, adjusted his tie, and began to weave his way through the tables, a gentle purpose guiding his steps towards the solitary figure in the floral dress. Each step brought him closer to the small, unlit world she inhabited, a world he intended, if only for a moment, to brighten. A quiet question. The clinking of cutlery and a murmur of happy voices filled the grand hall, a celebratory symphony that, to David, felt oddly out of tune with the small, still figure at the forgotten table. He'd watched her for a while, a wisp of a girl, carefully pushing peas around her plate with a fork far too large for her tiny hand. With a final glance at his chattering family, he pushed back his chair, a faint scrape against the polished floor, and began his quiet journey across the room. He approached her table slowly, not wanting to startle her. Her head was bowed, dark curls partially obscuring her face, but he could see the plush, well-loved teddy bear propped up opposite her, its button eyes seeming to stare blankly at the untouched slice of cake. David's shadow fell across the white tablecloth, and Lily finally looked up, her wide, hazel eyes meeting his. They held a fleeting spark of curiosity before quickly dropping again, as if the connection was too much to bear. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, softer than the distant music. He didn't wait for an answer, interpreting her lack of protest as consent, and gently pulled out the chair opposite her, settling into it with a sigh that was more about the day's festivities than any weariness. He noticed the slight tremble in her hands as she gripped her fork. You're the groom's brother," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of conversation, a fragile sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. David smiled, a warm, reassuring curve of his lips. "That's me. David. And you must be Lily." He remembered his brother mentioning a young guest, an acquaintance of the bride's from her charity work. She nodded, a quick, almost imperceptible dip of her head. He let a comfortable silence settle between them for a moment, observing the intricate lace pattern on the tablecloth, the way the crystal glasses caught the light. Then, he leaned forward just a fraction, lowering his voice further. "Lily," he began, his tone gentle, almost conspiratorial, "everyone else seems to be with their families, or at least with a grown-up. Why are you all by yourself?" The question was simple, direct, yet imbued with genuine concern. Lily's gaze drifted to her teddy bear, a silent consultation. She picked up a stray crumb from the tablecloth and studied it intently, as if it held all the answers. The hum of the wedding receded, and for a beat, only the frantic beating of her own heart filled her ears. Finally, she took a breath, a tiny, almost imperceptible intake, and looked at him again. Her eyes, though still shy, held a quiet, ancient sorrow. I don't have any family here, Mr. David. I'm an orphan." The last two words were spoken with a quiet finality, a statement of fact devoid of self-pity, yet heavy with the weight of her reality. A pang struck David's chest, sharp and unexpected. He simply nodded, the bustling room fading into a distant blur. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all of it felt suddenly hollow. He saw only the small girl, her brave eyes, and the teddy bear, her silent companion in a world of boisterous joy. Sharing stories and sweets. The joyous clinking of cutlery and the gentle hum of happy chatter wove a celebratory tapestry, yet it only underscored the quiet ache nestled deep within Lily's chest. Perched precariously on the edge of her seat, she was an isolated islet amidst a sea of revelry. Her untouched plate stood in stark contrast to the scattered crumbs and half-eaten cake slices that surrounded her. From a nearby table, David observed her small, hunched figure, a pang of genuine sadness striking him. He'd seen countless children at weddings, but none exuded such profound solitude. This scene felt fundamentally wrong. With quiet resolve, he excused himself and approached, pulling an ornate chair beside her. "Mind if I join you?" he murmured, his voice a soft counterpoint to the celebratory din. Lily flinched, her wide, brown eyes darting up to meet his, then offered a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "You know," David began, leaning in conspiratorially, "weddings in my family are always a little eventful. Once, my Aunt Carol decided to serenade everyone with her own rendition of a love song during the toast, only to forget half the lyrics. My Uncle George had to hum so loudly it nearly drowned her out." A warm, genuine chuckle escaped him. Lily's lips twitched, a fleeting shadow of a smile. "Then there's my cousin, Leo. At my brother's last birthday, he tried to juggle 3 cupcakes and ended up wearing 2 of them. Quite a sticky predicament." Lily let out a small, involuntary puff of air, a sound almost like a giggle, the first joyful noise David had heard from her all day that wasn't a sniffle. His gaze followed hers to the magnificent, multi-tiered wedding cake, a confection of pristine white frosting and delicate sugar blooms. "You haven't had any cake, have you?" he asked, noting the wistful longing in her eyes. Without waiting for a reply, he carefully sliced a generous portion of the vanilla sponge, its creamy filling peeking out, and presented it on a clean plate. "This is truly the best part. It's a secret family recipe, my grandmother says it brings good luck to anyone who eats it." He nibbled a small piece himself. After a moment's hesitation, Lily picked up her fork, taking a delicate bite. Her eyes closed briefly, as if savoring the sweetness. A tiny smear of frosting graced her cheek, and David, unable to resist, gently wiped it away with his thumb. Their eyes met, and this time, a real, uninhibited giggle bubbled up from her, a bright, melodic sound, a small beacon in the grand hall. For the first time all day, a genuine smile bloomed on Lily's face, transforming her quiet demeanor into something radiant. David felt a quiet satisfaction settle in his chest. He knew, then, that she wouldn't be alone much longer. A special guest. The brass band struck up a lively polka, its cheerful notes filling the grand hall, but Lily barely registered the music. David, however, seemed to have an endless supply of quiet energy. He knelt beside her chair, his voice a warm murmur above the rising din. "So, did you try one of those little chocolate things with the raspberry filling? They're incredible." He gestured towards a silver tray being carried past by a waiter. Lily shook her head, her gaze fixed on the bustling crowd. She clutched Mr. Buttons tighter, the worn fabric offering a small comfort. It felt overwhelming. So many laughing faces, so many swirling dresses. She was just a small shadow in a bright, boisterous painting. David seemed to sense her apprehension. He didn't push. Instead, he pulled a small, colorful party popper from his pocket. "Ever done one of these before?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. Lily's eyes widened slightly. She'd only ever seen them in shop windows. He showed her how to twist the base, then, with a playful, "Ready," he gave it a gentle pop. A shower of iridescent confetti rained down around them, sparkling in the soft light from the chandeliers. Lily let out a small, surprised giggle. It was a tiny sound, almost lost in the revelry, but David heard it. "You know," he said, leaning in conspiratorially, you're the most important guest here tonight, after the bride and groom, of course. Lily looked at him, bewildered. Really? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Absolutely, he affirmed, his expression earnest. It's not every day we have someone with such excellent taste in teddy bears join us. Mr. Buttons looks very distinguished, by the way. He even offered a small, respectful nod to the bear. Lily instinctively straightened Mr. Buttons' tiny bow tie, a faint blush touching her cheeks. He then started a quiet game, pointing out people and inventing elaborate backstories for them. See that woman with the feather in her hat? She's actually a secret agent, on a very important mission to find the best canapés. Lily found herself giggling again, imagining the stern-faced woman stealthily sampling mini quiches. He made her a partner in his observations, asking her to guess which guest might be a famous explorer or a master baker. Later, he brought her a small glass of sparkling apple juice, garnished with a slice of orange and a miniature umbrella. A special concoction for a special guest, he declared, presenting it with a flourish usually reserved for fine wine. Lily took a tentative sip. It was sweet and fizzy, unlike anything she'd ever tasted. She found herself watching the dancers, not with a sense of isolation, but with a growing curiosity. The music, which had seemed so loud before, now felt like an invitation. David, seeing her interest, didn't insist she dance, but simply observed alongside her, sharing a quiet smile when a particularly enthusiastic couple twirled past. The evening air, once heavy with the unfamiliarity of the place, now felt lighter, infused with the scent of lilies and the happy chatter of people. Lily, for the first time that night, felt a spark of genuine joy flicker within her. She was no longer just the girl sitting alone, she was a special guest, sharing an adventure with her new friend, David. A hopeful invitation. The last strains of the band's final waltz drifted into the cool evening air, carrying with them the scent of wilting roses and celebratory champagne. Guests, flushed with warmth and good cheer, were beginning to filter out, their laughter echoing a little less boisterously now. Lily watched them go, a familiar pang of wistfulness tightening around her chest. The grand ballroom, so vibrant just hours ago, was slowly returning to its silent, opulent self. She hugged her worn teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles, a little tighter, feeling the soft, familiar comfort of his matted fur. Soon, she knew, it would be time for her to slip away too, back to the quiet familiarity of her own small world. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up to see David standing beside her chair. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, and his tie was slightly askew, giving him a more relaxed, approachable air. A gentle smile touched his lips, crinkling the corners of his kind eyes. "Still here?" he asked, his voice a warm rumble. "I thought everyone had vanished." Lily offered a shy smile in return. "Just enjoying the quiet," she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the emptying tables. David nodded, his gaze following hers before settling back on her. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers idly tracing the rim of an abandoned glass on the table beside them. "Lily," he began, his voice softening, "my family, they really liked you. My mother, especially. She was asking if you'd like to, well, spend a bit more time with us. Perhaps meet the rest of the family properly, away from all this chaos." He gestured vaguely at the lingering remnants of the wedding. "Maybe come over for Sunday lunch." Lily's heart gave a sudden, hopeful leap. Her eyes, usually so downcast, widened, reflecting the last of the ballroom's glittering chandeliers. The thought, so unexpected, felt like a burst of sunlight on a cloudy day. To be invited, truly invited, into a family's home, to share a meal, to simply be with them, it was a possibility she hadn't dared to dream of. The loneliness that often clung to her began to unravel, replaced by a delicate thread of anticipation. "Oh," she breathed, the word barely a whisper. "Oh, I would like that very much, David. More than anything." A genuine, radiant smile bloomed on her face, illuminating her features in a way David hadn't seen before. Mr. Snuggles, clutched in her hands, seemed to nod in silent agreement. David's smile broadened, a genuine warmth radiating from him. "Wonderful," he said, his voice laced with quiet pleasure. "I'll tell my mother. She'll be thrilled." He held out a hand, and Lily, after a brief moment of hesitation, placed her own small hand in his. The touch was gentle, reassuring, and for the first time in a long while, Lily felt a profound sense of belonging. The thought of Sunday lunch, of warm conversations and shared laughter, filled her with a quiet, exhilarating hope. Warm welcomes. The scent of roasted chicken and something sweet, like cinnamon and apples, wrapped around Lily as David guided her through the bustling entryway. Laughter and lively conversation spilled from a brightly lit room to their left, drawing her gaze. The air inside the house was markedly different from the crisp evening outside, filled with a comforting warmth that seeped into her bones. David's hand on her back was a gentle, reassuring weight. He led her into the cheerful chaos of the living room, where several people were gathered. A woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a soft bun immediately turned, her smile widening. This had to be Eleanor. Next to her, a man with a booming laugh and David's strong jawline sat on a plush armchair, gesturing animatedly with a glass in his hand. Two other couples were engaged in conversation by a crackling fireplace, one pair distinctly radiating the fresh glow of newlyweds. "Mom, Dad, everyone, this is Lily," David announced, his voice carrying easily over the chatter. He squeezed Lily's shoulder lightly. "She was at the wedding today. You remember, the little girl I told you about, the one who, well, she was incredibly brave." All eyes turned to Lily. A familiar wave of shyness washed over her, making her want to shrink into David's shadow. She clutched the strap of her small bag, feeling the comforting, albeit lumpy, presence of Barnaby inside. The woman, Eleanor, stood up and glided towards them, her movements graceful and unhurried. Her eyes, a warm hazel, crinkled at the corners as she looked at Lily. "Lily, dear, it's so lovely to meet you," Eleanor's voice was soft, like worn velvet. She reached out, not to shake a hand, but to gently cup Lily's cheek. Her touch was surprisingly firm yet tender. "David told us a little about you. You must be tired after such an eventful day." Before Lily could stammer out a reply, Eleanor pulled her into a warm embrace. It wasn't a perfunctory hug, it was a genuine, enveloping gesture, smelling faintly of lavender and home. Lily, accustomed to the stiff, impersonal interactions of the orphanage, instinctively tensed for a moment before relaxing into the unfamiliar comfort. She hadn't realized how much she'd yearned for such simple affection. "Anyone who shows such courage," Eleanor continued, pulling back just enough to look into Lily's eyes, "deserves the warmest welcome imaginable. Come, sit by the fire. You must be freezing. And hungry, I expect. We have plenty of food." She glanced at David, a knowing look passing between them. "David, why don't you get Lily a plate? And perhaps some of that apple pie I just pulled from the oven." A small, hopeful spark ignited within Lily's chest. The warmth of Eleanor's hug, the genuine concern in her voice, felt like an unexpected balm. For the first time in a long while, the gnawing loneliness that often accompanied her seemed to recede, replaced by a tentative sense of belonging. The room no longer felt quite so overwhelming, the faces less intimidating, bathed in the soft glow of the fire and Eleanor's gentle smile. Promises of tomorrow. The scent of roasted chicken still lingered in the air, a comforting perfume that Lily had only ever associated with holidays at the orphanage, sparse, hurried affairs. Here, it felt like an extension of the warmth radiating from David's family. Eleanor, her face etched with a mix of concern and fierce protectiveness, had listened intently as David recounted Lily's lonely vigil by the window, the whispered conversation about her lack of family. Lily, clutching her worn teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles, had kept her gaze fixed on the intricate pattern of the rug, a tapestry of muted greens and golds. "Oh, my dear," Eleanor murmured, her voice a soft caress. She reached across the polished mahogany table, her hand gently covering Lily's small, trembling one. Lily flinched slightly, unaccustomed to such tender contact, but Eleanor's touch was steadfast, reassuring. To think of you all alone, her eyes, the same warm hazel as David's, welled up slightly. David's father, a quiet man with a kind smile, nodded gravely. No child should feel unwanted, especially on such a joyous day. He pushed a plate of untouched chocolate cake closer to Lily, its rich aroma finally tempting her. Then, the floodgates of affection opened. David's sister, Sarah, a whirlwind of vibrant energy, knelt beside Lily's chair. You know, we always have room for one more at our Sunday dinners. There's always too much food anyway, right, Mom? She winked at Eleanor. Eleanor beamed, her earlier sadness replaced by a resolute cheerfulness. Absolutely. We'd love for you to join us, Lily. Next Sunday, perhaps. We can bake cookies. What's your favorite kind? Lily's breath hitched. Cookies. Sunday dinners. These were concepts from storybooks, not her reality. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was a whisper. Chocolate chip. Perfect. David exclaimed, his smile wide and genuine. He ruffled her hair playfully. And we can go to the park, too. There's a fantastic playground with swings that go so high, you feel like you're flying. The offers cascaded around her, a torrent of kindness. Eleanor promised to teach her to knit, Sarah vowed to show her how to make friendship bracelets, and David spoke of lending her books from his vast collection. It wasn't just an invitation, it was an embrace. It was a promise not just of a single visit, but of a continued presence, a thread weaving her into their lives. For the first time, Lily felt a blossoming warmth in her chest, a sensation akin to sunshine after a long, cold winter. The loneliness that had been her constant companion began to recede, replaced by a fragile, yet potent, hope. Mr. Snuggles felt lighter in her arms, as if he, too, sensed the shift. This wasn't just tomorrow, this was a tomorrow she could actually look forward to. A full heart. The last strains of the wedding waltz faded, replaced by a joyful din of congratulations and laughter. Lily, still clutching her worn teddy bear, stood on the periphery, a small smile playing on her lips. The air around her hummed with a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time, a comforting energy that seeped into her very bones. Mr. Harrison, the groom's brother, had walked her to the edge of the reception hall, his hand a gentle presence on her shoulder. He'd promised to visit, a promise that resonated with a sincerity she hadn't heard from an adult in years. He knelt, bringing his kind eyes level with hers. You were wonderful, Lily Bug. A true ray of sunshine. He squeezed her shoulder lightly. I'll see you soon, all right? We'll plan an adventure. Lily nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, but her bright eyes conveyed a heartfelt agreement. She watched him rejoin the celebrating crowd, a figure of effortless grace and kindness. The carriage, a relic from a bygone era, awaited her, its polished wood gleaming under the soft glow of the evening lanterns. As she climbed inside, the plush velvet seats felt different tonight, less like a temporary perch and more like a safe haven. She settled in, pressing her face into the soft fur of her bear, Barnaby. Before, holding him was a comfort against loneliness. Tonight, it was a comfort born of shared joy. The journey back to the orphanage was usually a quiet, melancholic affair, the familiar route passing by forgotten storefronts and silent houses. Tonight, however, the world outside the carriage window seemed to shimmer with a new brilliance. The streetlights cast long, dancing shadows, and the distant hum of the city sounded like a lullaby. Lily hummed a tune from the wedding, a light, airy melody that matched the lightness in her chest. Barnaby's button eyes seemed to twinkle back at her. Did you see, Barnaby? She whispered, her voice barely a breath. He really meant it. He likes me. She pulled him closer, a genuine, wide smile spreading across her face. It wasn't just Mr. Harrison, it was the warmth in the bride's eyes, the way the wedding guests had smiled at her, the shared joy that had filled the air. She felt like she'd been wrapped in a soft, invisible blanket of affection. The carriage eventually pulled up to the familiar, somewhat imposing gates of St. Augustine's. The stone walls, usually a symbol of her isolation, didn't feel quite so daunting tonight. She hopped out, a spring in her step, and thanked the driver with a polite curtsy she'd practiced in secret. As she walked up the worn path, the chill of the evening air didn't penetrate her newfound warmth. Entering the silent hall of the orphanage, she paused, looking around at the shadowed corners that usually held a quiet sadness. But tonight, they held only potential. She wasn't alone. The thought bloomed in her heart, a vibrant, resilient flower. She had found a connection, a thread woven into the grand tapestry of life that now included her. Mr. Harrison's promise wasn't just a fleeting politeness, it was a beacon. She had glimpsed a world where she belonged, where kindness was freely given, and where her presence was not just tolerated, but truly desired. Clutching Barnaby, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that her story was just beginning. Her heart, once a quiet, guarded space, was now full.